prosecute 3 environmental campaigners involved in a demonstration paper that inmates are living in luxury apartments within the jail. Prison staff have been accused of allowing inmates to have sex with visitors. But the jail's deputy governor says that's rubbish.
Grendon Prisoners converted a former hospital wing into a unit to prepare low-security prisoners for release. But both governors and staff and even some prisoners are furious over reports in today's Sun newspaper that inmates are living in luxury.
They do not live in the lap of luxury, and what's more, it is only for a very small number of prisoners who are just about to be released. And the whole emphasis of the unit is, after all, to get people back acclimatised and socialised so they can go out into the community and live law-abiding lives.
The unit houses 5 low-security inmates. The Sun describes them as perverts and sex offenders and claims officers turn a blind eye to sex with visitors.
There are no sex or conjugal visits of any kind. What we do have, which is a tactic for releasing people from custody, is that we have family days. That's when prisoners can invite their families in to stay for the day, at which they might have a meal or something like that. But it's all very strictly supervised.
The pre-release unit was set up to help acclimatise long-term prisoners to life on the outside.
We're setting out to basically give them the feel that they're outside of the prison walls, although they're contained within a secure skin, and giving them the feeling of living out in a block of flats, or in one man's case in a bedsit.
The prison also says the Sun is wrong in claiming that 85% of the 200 inmates are sex offenders. They say the proportion is just over a quarter.
Well, Mike Rowbottom reporting there. And tomorrow night we begin a series of 3 special reports from Grendon Prison.
Pioneering regime tries to help them come to terms with their crimes and begin seeking a better life. Tonight we go back for the first of 3 reports on how they succeeded or failed. The Inside Story, Chapter 2.
It's 9 o'clock. The corridors of D Wing at Grendon Prison are deserted. Everyone's involved in sorting out their lives except for John Legg. He's leaving this morning and he's already said his goodbyes.
All the best. Yeah. Send you away. Thanks a lot.
John is 9.5 years into a life sentence for murder and he's moving on to a lower security prison and maybe even release. He's nervous.
Yeah, in a way. Not as nervous as I thought I would be. In a way, I've got to watch what I say as well, because I'm still a prisoner and I'm still in a hostile environment in some places that I go.
He'll no longer be able to call prison officers by their first names, and he'll miss the support of his fellow Grendon inmates. John came to the prison 2 years ago and became part of the intensive therapy regime which sets it apart from any other in the British penal system. He took part in group sessions where inmates are forced to confront themselves and their crimes. There's a strict non-violence rule, but after that, the gloves are off.
I ended up getting tied to beds, I ended up getting raped, I ended up getting burned with cigarettes and all sorts. And that completely destroyed my life because I held on to that poison. The defences I built to keep people away from me, to stop them ever having the opportunity of subjecting me to that horror again, I also built a prison that kept me locked in with it.
We first met John Legg 2 years ago, shortly after he arrived. Both he and the staff now see him as a success. Today he was moving on, but he still doesn't know if he will be out soon or if his sentence will continue.
I always refer back to the crime. When you've got a dead body on your hands, I'm sorry I say it like that, but that's how it is. When you've got a dead body on your hands, your place doesn't belong in society. And if you've got an ounce of sanity in your head, you're going to say, get things sorted out. You can't be doing this. It's wrong. And that's the incentive to change.
We've returned to see how John Legg and others have succeeded or failed with the Grendon regime. People like Sean Hazel.
Violence, mate, it's what I can do. I know what I'm capable of doing, and I know what can happen. So you're scared of yourself? Yeah, man.
2 years ago, Sean was an angry, bitter and violent young man. He was uncertain about his future at Grendon and found it hard to mention the word love without spitting it out.
You cannot, and I don't give a hell what anyone says, just accept love and affection.
No, really?
I mean, for the last 26 years, 25 years, I've had enough of this life, mate. I'd rather die than go back out like I am.
Now he's one of the first to help the new entrants get used to it.
Well, you're not on your own, are you? Because like you're in a group with like 7, 8 people. Anytime you feel like you need to talk to them, you can go to them any time of the day, call a special group, an informal group. You've also got a staff that you can go and talk to. Or when you open up about painful things, it does hurt.
It's the hardest thing to do, isn't it? Become yourself again.
Of course it is.
I've been somebody else.
Of course it is. Like when anger arises again, I know I can stand there and talk it out instead of using my fists or knives or batons or whatever it may be, you know?
Is it your first response to want to talk it out now?
Yeah. I don't know, mate, I said I'm getting too old.
The man who couldn't say the word love got married at the end of April. He's now looking forward to coming out into the community.
Since I've been here, it's like when I show emotion on a group, someone flings their arms around me and like cuddles me and that. I don't shy back. I don't edge away from it because I know it's meant. They don't want nothing. They're not after anything.
As they come to the end of their time, new inmates come in and go through the same process. Like George, who's been on the wing for a few weeks.
The thing is, like, I didn't intend to kill my victim, and it's even worse to know that the geezer was actually trying to help me by pulling me off somebody else. How do you think I feel? How the f do I live with that?
And that's just the start. George still has a very long way to go, and it won't be easy. Not everyone succeeds. John Shaw, despite having his life opened up at Grendon, still failed close to the last hurdle. We'll look at his story tomorrow. But for now, John Legg is carrying a lot of hope with him as he leaves Grendon. Not just his, but that of his colleagues and officers. Some of them have become friends.
He was a great one for being truthful. He didn't mince his words, but he saw both sides of an argument.
I killed a man in 1984, that was the end of his life. Mine still goes on. The only way I can truly say I'm sorry is to be a better person.
A final handshake with his senior officer, and then the cold reality of his transfer finally hits him. Handcuffs. The first time he's worn them for 2 years. The officers are no longer his friends and supporters. They're back to being his jailers. But the 2 years have not been for nothing. As he sits in the prison van, he looks relaxed. The next stage of his story is somewhere else, but for the first time in his life, he feels equipped to deal with it.
Mike Rowbottom reporting on some of the extraordinary Grendon successes. Well, tomorrow he'll be looking at some of the prisoners who didn't stay the course in Inside Story Chapter 2. Well, meanwhile, an inmate who's been...
End of our series revisiting the prison, Mike Rowbottom reports on the inmates who couldn't cope with the strict rules.
Honestly, it's taken 3 years...
You can run, but you can't hide at Grendon Prison.
Every other day, screaming blue murder. To get here.
You're here now. The last thing you want to do is to delay your progress by starting to fight causes and raise banners. They're there for you. There'll be a time for you to do it. But the first thing you need to do is to stop and look at George.
The endless talking means that at some time you run out of excuses and smokescreens. You may succeed in keeping something from the other inmates, but never from yourself, and that's what makes Grendon so tough.
I've got a victim's family out there who'll probably hate me for the rest of their life, and they've got a right to, because I hate myself for what I've done. But I had to find the reason why I did it. And hopefully, if they could understand why I did it, you know, then they might not feel as much hatred. But I am apprehensive at times. I'm apprehensive of letting things out. You know, there's some things that hurt me so much that I don't want to let out.
It always gets tougher before getting easier at Grendon, and not everyone stays the course. Some pull out after a few months. Some go most of the way and then fall, and some use the time for their own purpose.
Well, first off, congratulations on getting through your assessment.
When we came here 2 years ago, John Shaw had been in for 16 months. He was serving a life sentence and came with an appalling discipline record from other prisons, including 2 escape attempts.
When I first arrived here, I was told that I was probably the worst thing that could ever happen to Grendon. I've got 2 major escapes on my record, and I've got a really abysmal security record. You know, 2 major escapes and 18 nickings and 7.5 years down the block, GOD'd in various different places. And the security weren't happy about me being here.
John Shaw turned himself into Grendon's star turn very quickly. He appeared on various TV programmes after this one and became the voice of Grendon.
I had a severe temper. I mean, real violent outbursts that I used to use to keep people at a distance, and I ended up killing someone, Sean. And I never wanted to kill again. And one of the reasons I used to run away and go down the block so often was I used to find myself walking the landings, bladed up. And all it needed was a word out of place. I was going to turn somebody into a Tetley teabag. I was going to end up killing again and never getting out. 50% of the reason for coming here was to have a look at the place and maybe, if I couldn't get anything from it, just try and manipulate it. That was my nature. I would manipulate anything to get my own ends.
But things went wrong for John Shaw. He had to leave the prison because of a sexual indiscretion committed with a girlfriend on a visit. But his progress had been so good, he went straight to an open prison. Then it went wrong again. He disappeared for a week while out on temporary parole. Now he's in a higher security prison. So was it all an act?
He has expressed great sorrow for what happened and is upset that in fact his behaviour may have some reflection on the effectiveness of Grendon, because he is greatly committed, very strongly committed to what happens here and the opportunities that it's given him in his life.
He's a little bit fragile, so we're asking all the people in the community not to sort of approach him with too much that's heavy.
Well, I knew John Shaw in the early 80s when I was at Maidstone, and John was an animal then. He was a system animal. He'd fight staff and fight cons alike. And when I met him again here, when he interviewed me on neighbouring, I didn't recognise him. It wasn't John Shaw that I knew. And apparently he was that way when he arrived here, a Mr. Nice Guy. And that could have been John Shaw. You don't just switch off the way he was and become normal again. It's taken me 2 years to do it, to get back into being a human being again, because I was an animal.
Come in, mate, take a seat.
Dave Casely wasn't out to con anyone when he came 2 years ago.
Then. Grendon, where have you travelled from?
Scrubs.
As Officer Joe Chapman introduced him to the prison, he recognised problems with the strict non-violence rule.
Yeah, supposing some nonce is sitting there and he's talking about this and that and what he does and what he don't do. You know what I mean?
What I'm asking you to do...
I knew I had to sit on my hands before I come here, but you know what I mean?
You had to? To what?
I knew I'd have to sit on my hands before I came here. I knew that much. I was told that much, but don't know, now you're here. Sort of, it's a reality now, isn't it?
In the end, the reality proved too much. He hit someone after 9 months and was forced to leave Grendon.
I was saddened to hear that he was going from Grendon because it was due to an act of violence. It was an argument that got out of hand, and he was found guilty of committing an act of violence and was transferred out. But 2 days before he left, he actually stood in the corridor and told me that he'd gained.
Grendon staff are convinced that everyone benefits from their time there, and the longer the time spent, the more benefit.
If people manage to stay longer, their reoffending rates drop. It isn't just because they're better bets. We control for other criminal characteristics. And we know from the Grendon reconviction study that the overall reoffending rate is nearly 40%, but for the people who manage to graduate through therapy, it drops to around 20%.
The work continues. In 2 years, the people on the wing have changed almost completely. A new set of people is now trying to tackle a new set of problems. In 2 years' time, who can say which of these will count themselves a success or a failure?
Mike Rowbottom at Grendon Underwood Prison. Now, scores of books have...
regime there.
Tonight we saw how inmates are helped to prepare for life beyond the jail.
George is able to say what he feels for the first time in his life. He killed a man. Grendon is helping him to face that.
Because there's an awful lot of people I've met in the system who are lifers, who really do care about their victims, who really do care about what they've done. If they could correct it by giving their lives, they would do it. I know that.
The intensity, intimacy and pressure at Grendon leave a lasting mark. But what happens after the talking is over, the therapy finished? Where do prisoners go after the close support of Grendon has been taken away? 2 years ago, they didn't have an adequate answer.
It's a deficiency that, in fact, people have to go to another culture, but the strength of the people develop whilst they are here in therapy, we hope will enable them to survive that and retain their integrity rather than totally conforming to the expectations of other people.
Now they're beginning to address the issue. 2 new units have been started up to help prisoners graduate from Grendon to the outside or to another prison. They've been set up by prison officer Joe Chapman in Grendon's former hospital wing. The idea in the pre-release unit is to provide an area within the walls which closely corresponds to life outside. Right now the area is separated only by a door from the rest of the prison.
Oh, Shane, can I word with you, mate, about your home life? Yeah, it's a vote from probation, actually, just to run down the dates with you.
The idea is to reintroduce long-term prisoners to the reality of living outside.
Yeah, they've confirmed you want to go out on the 11th, and the 11th to the 14th.
The most difficult thing, in fact, was the night times, because you expect like to be knocked in your little cell and end of the story. But up here, you're out all night. Any slight little noise, you're expecting someone to come through the door, and it's really strange. But that's all wearing off now. And this is just like being free, I suppose. You know what I mean? You just treat it as normal.
The inmates have their own living accommodation and share a kitchen which includes knives. The only remaining link with prison life is the bars on the other sides of the windows.
This place here, it's out of this world. When I first came up here, I came up here 3 months ago. I came up here in the middle of the week on the Wednesday, so I could get settled in for the weekend. And I went out of this place at 12:30, the same day, the same night. And I sat outside there for 2 hours because I couldn't believe it.
We're setting out to basically give them the feel that they're outside of the prison walls, although they're contained within a secure skin, and giving them the feeling of living out in a block of flats, or in one man's case in a bedsit, a feel to be independent again, and to handle the things such as the knives and the full power bleach and the furniture polish, things that you and I perhaps take for granted that they're not normally allowed to handle in the main system.
The pre-release unit is particularly geared up to actually help people with practical ways in which they will need to develop survival skills when they leave here. And so far, we think that it's going to meet the needs very effectively.
Upstairs in the same building, other prisoners prepare to move on. A new pre-transfer unit's been set up to help them wind down from the Grendon regime. This time they have cells because in nearly all cases they'll be going on to a lower security prison. David is going to an open prison and he's apprehensive. As a sex offender, he knows he'll have to watch himself.
If I can go to another prison from here, move on and be honest, then I'd like to do that. Obviously, because of my offences, I'm going to be very careful who I'm honest with. It's a risk, but I'm determined that when I move on from here, I'm not going to leave Grendon behind.
The units may be able to help prisoners get used to the nuts and bolts of the outside world, how to work a cooker, or even catch a bus. But it still leaves one major task. Having regained their self-respect, they have to win the respect of the world outside. And as they take on that, they may sometimes think that life behind bars was easier.
Well, that was the last in our series of special reports on Grendon Prison compiled by Mike Rowbottom.